Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure. This is our ongoing live stream where we are in the process of creating our very own campaign from scratch, including our own custom domain of dread. If this is your first time joining us, we are picking up partway through the process where we have already created the basis of our domain of dread, in which we have, which is takes place in and around an enormous inland sea. We have decided how our characters get here through a portal that opens up on the blood moon, talked about reasons why they might want to venture forth into this unknown land. We have created where they land when they start, a town that we're calling Darkport, a shanty town at the edge of this inland sea, still built up out of the ruins of what was uh, a sprawling empire that is now the basin for the sea itself, so much of it is flooded. Uh, we have created our very first adventure in which the characters are kidnapped by one of the factions in our domain of dread, an aboleth-led faction, and briefly enslaved, and then are forced to escape using their own wits and a little help from another one of the factions in our domain of dread. Um, during which escape they learn about the existence of an artifact that gives the wielder almost absolute control over this domain of dread, and of course becomes the thing that will allow them to escape. And now we are working on the next part of the campaign where the characters set out on their own and they get proactive and they start looking for this artifact for themselves so that they can escape their fate of being stuck here in this domain of dread forever. So I'm RJ Kerr, and we're going to dive into our adventure at this point. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So last time we were working on building out this node structure section of our adventure. This part of the adventure where the characters are being proactive, they're making decisions, they're finding clues, and they're following those clues. And because we don't necessarily know which clues our players are going to choose to follow, which ones they're going to find right off the gate, right out of the gate, even though we've populated a fair number of them throughout the world and are still adding some more clues in various places to ensure that there's plenty of leads for them to follow. We're using a node structure that allows them to kind of move between different points in the adventure in whatever order that they like. And so we're just building those out in chunks so that they can explore those at their will. We were working on one where they go seeking a treasure hunter who might have a lead as to the location of this artifact. And of course, the treasure hunter isn't sitting at home twiddling their thumbs. They are out in the world and looking for treasure and the artifact themselves. And so they are out in a dungeon environment. And since this is just one of the what we're calling investigative scenes, a situation where the characters go looking for more clues and more information, we wanted this to be a short kind of dungeon environment. And so we created a 5-room dungeon with this. We spent a couple sessions really kind of fleshing this out, probably putting more detail into it than you would really need if you were going to run this for your own group on a weekly basis. A lot of this stuff, that we thought of, you'd be able to kind of pull out of your own head as you went. But since we're kind of writing this as though we're writing it for other people, we went ahead and put a lot of this other detail in here. So we developed a premise and created a vibe. The idea that this is the ruins of an ancient outpost where that fell when Ovander, the elemental evil that this domain of dread contains, came to power, and is now this place is now now home to a host of elementals and undead. And the outpost is a cluster of crumbling towers connected by wind-swept stone bridges with many balconies and parapets that are exposed to the elements. The atmosphere is preternaturally stormy, with roiling skies and arcs of purple lightning jumping between the clouds, and the rain is frequent as if the heavens themselves were trying to wash clean the taint of this place. And so, with that in mind, we built out a 5-room dungeon without requiring a map for this. We're doing this with Theater of the Mind, and so we spent a little time building out our general features here and connecting sort of the environment and the mechanics that will kind of help make this feel like a stormy, windswept collection of ruined towers where the characters are exploring at higher altitudes, at higher elevations, I should say. Um, we added some random encounters in here for them to find as they go through to make the transitions between space to space feel less like they're just moving from room to room and more like they're exploring sections of tower at a time. Um, we then built out our 5 room dungeon with our entry, including a low difficulty encounter that might not even be a combat counter at all. We included a setback in there where the characters have a moderate difficulty encounter that takes place between a gargoyle and with a gargoyle and some skeletons on one of those windswept bridges, high, at a high elevation, and so we could have some challenging, fun combat in that situation. We included and created a puzzle from scratch, which isn't required for the characters to move forward, but might give them a boon if they solve it. And it's all based off of the deciphering the orientation of the various planes of existence with their in their relation to the material plane at the center. And we put clues for that earlier on in the adventure. Um, One thing about the puzzles that I like to do when I do this is, again, not making it so that you have to solve the puzzle to move forward. There should always be a way around the puzzle, even if that way is not, uh, you know, obvious necessarily. In this case, the puzzle is more of an offshoot of the main adventure, as opposed to it being a barrier between one section of the adventure and the next. Because if the puzzle must be solved to move forward, you can end up in a situation where the characters are just kind of stalled. And so we instead put a reward in there for solving the puzzle, including 2 potions of lightning resistance, which can be very useful in the confrontation with the big bad, and a collection of 30 assorted gems for some materialistic reward. And then we culminated with a climactic encounter with our big bad that is a reskin of an Azure Sentinel, where we swapped out the fire damage and immunity for lightning damage and immunity. And we did the same thing for a couple of Magmen as well, so that they would have a more stormy elemental kind of feel to them, but still be balanced for a group of 4 second level characters, which are likely to be the levels that the characters are when they explore this section of the adventure. So we added a little complication to that by saying that this is where they find the treasure hunter too, and that they need to work together with the treasure hunter to defeat this Azure Sentinel. But this treasure hunter doesn't have a whole lot of motivation to keep the party alive because they want to keep their secrets. They don't want to help the party find the artifact on their on without them. They want to find the artifact for themselves. And so by creating sort of potentially conflicting objectives within this encounter, we've added a little more interest to it, so it'll be a lot more fun for our characters to play, without adding a whole lot of complication or making it much, much harder to run. And then we've closed out our 5 room dungeon with the reward, and the reward is pretty simple. They have the opportunity to interview the treasure hunter potentially if they keep them alive, and potentially find out clues that will lead them to other parts of the adventure. So, since this is pretty much wrapped up, there's just one thing that I think we need to do before we move on, and one other thing that we might want to do before we move on. The one thing that we need to do is we need to name our treasure hunter. We put that off, and we haven't given them a name yet. We've given them a stat block, they're a spy, but they need a name because they need to be a functional NPC for us. And so we need to come up with a little bit of detail about them. The other thing that we can do if you're interested, and please let me know in the chat if you are, is we can talk a little bit about block text or box text. So text that we would write with the intention of reading that to our players as they move through the adventure. I don't always do a lot of that when I'm writing for myself, but I do a fair amount of that when I am writing adventures for other people. And so if you'd like me to talk a little bit about that tonight, we can do that. Just let me know in the chat if you have an opinion. And of course, as always, this is an interactive stream. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, topics that you want to chat about as we go through this, jump at the chat. I love to hear from you guys. The ideas that you all come up with are some of the most inventive that we've had on this stream, and I love them. So the more interaction from you all, the better, in my opinion. All right. So uh, let's see here. Jonathan Frost says an example of box text would be cool. Okay, yeah, we can do at least one, so we can kind of get a feel for how that works. Um, but first, let's start with naming our treasure hunter, since that is something that we need to do. So, what should our treasure hunter's name be? Um, we can use a random name generator for that if we want, or we can try to come up with something that's a little thematic. Um, my favorite random name generator is fantasynamegenerators.com. I think it does a good job. And I frequently will lean towards the real name section in there and try to find places, an interesting spot of the world with an interesting collection of names. And then, riff off of that. So let's see here. What sounds good? When in doubt, I frequently will lean in. I'll go to the Americas and I'll go to either colonial American names or I will go to the hillbilly name one section is I find generates a rich selection of names that can be fun. And it doesn't necessarily place our character. It makes it a little more ubiquitous, I think, or a little more universal, I think. So let's try that one. Let's go with that. Let's see what we can come up with here. Let's see here. Let's say, ooh, Enos. 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 I like that one for a name. Yeah, Ghost in Shock and Ghost in a Sock. Yeah, hillbilly name generator, right? I know it's on there and I love it. I comes up with I think just some cool fantasy names. I don't know why we don't get more names like that in fantasy adventures, but sometimes you just have to put things in adventures when you're writing them that make you personally smile. Not everything that goes in the adventures for the players. Sometimes it's just for you. And I frequently will work that into the names, a name that just makes me happy. So let's say Enos. We have to have, Jonathan Frost says we have to have a Cletus somewhere in there. Yeah, I love when we have a Cletus, when we have a Virgil and a Homer. Those are a couple of my favorites that I love to work in, especially for more colorful characters. I did an adventure at one point that I wrote for some friends that had Cletus, Virgil, and Homer, and they were undead. That they were revenants that the players could encounter, and the goal was, or their goal was, that they were looking for living beings to eat, and so they would capture the players and then have just an argument about who got to eat what, like the trolls in The Hobbit. And so it was just a fun sort of let's escape from these undead while they have this silly discussion about who's going to eat us first. It was a good time. But we'll definitely work a Cletus in here somewhere. But let's go with Enos and let's give him a last name. Let's give him something that is. I feel like this is like a nom de plume, a nom de gars, or something that he gave himself. And what should we? What kind of last name would our treasure hunter give themselves? Something that's perhaps indicative of their personality. Let's see here. We can. Ghost in a Sock. Oh, I am stealing that scene. Oh, please, yeah, feel free. Anything you find on this channel, feel free to steal. This is This is for the collective. But again, it was just one of those moments that made me personally laugh, and I felt like it needed to be in there because I really just wanted to have this argument with myself while the players were coming up with a plan. And uh, yeah, it was a good time. It was a very good time. Sometimes it's you just gotta do what's gonna make you smile. All right, let's. We can also go to on the random name generator. Sometimes for last names, I like to use the fantasy and folklore one and see something that kind of jumps out at me. Because sometimes last names could be a little weird, and in a good way. I mean, I like to make them a little bit odd. They're memorable that way. So let's see here. There's one that's generated. It's bandit names. Let's see there. Um, and this is stuff like uh, Jared the Razor, Toothless Terrell, Smokey Farley. It's I don't think any of that really fits. Um, let's try something else. Let's try. Let's see. Oh, there's one fantasy surnames. Well, let's do that. Okay, that's stuff like Water Draft, Fuse Mantle, Mild Keeper, Crest Watcher, Doomtoe, Bloodmite, Pharaoh Snarl, Wolf Talon. Let's keep going. Logust. I don't know why that sticks out to me, but it does. Enos Logust. I like that. Cool. So he's got a name. Doomtoe. Yeah, Doomtoe is one of them. Uh, again, sometimes things that you got to do just because they make you laugh. All right. So let's give him a quick little personality trait. Let's see here. In addition, the pieces encounter. Let's just give him like one or two words of personality because we kind of have a want. He wants to keep his secrets to himself here, so we don't need, so he's got enough for us to kind of role play him, but let's give him a little bit of a vibe. He's a treasure hunter, right? Is he an Indiana Jones kind of treasure hunter? Is he more of like a moonshiner kind of treasure hunter? Is he um, you know, I with a name like Enos, I think he's more of a moonshiner kind of treasure hunter. So kind of a backwoods kind of expert. Reminds me of Don John Raskin from what is it? The Essentials kit, Dragon of Icespire Peak adventure. I always played him as kind of a backwoodsy, uh, you know, treasure huntery, fortune seeker kind of guy. Um, and I kind of get that vibe with this too. So um, the so we'll say, yeah. Jonathan says, "Oh yeah, he's a little cracked. Been there too long." Yeah. Um, so yeah, we should call him the eccentric then. Eccentric Enos Logust. That gives us enough. He's a little wild hair there. Okay, excellent. So, um, let's see here. Okay, so that's our minimum. That's what we need to run this character. We've got everything we need to run this adventure. So anything else that we're adding is just kind of a nice to have as opposed to a must have at this point. So let's go ahead and work on some box text, an example of box text, just to kind of go over my approach to this. There are a couple ways that you can kind of get at box text. And I like to just use the call out here for that. So there's a couple schools of thought for this, right? You want to give enough information to the players so that they can kind of picture the space. And if you have a map, you can let the map do some of the lifting on a box text. If you don't, then you need to add in any pertinent information that they're going to need right out of the gate. But there is a balance, right? You want to give enough that it's colorful, that the place feels evocative, and it's not just like you enter a room. Dun, dun, dun. You want to give them some flavor, give them a feel to the space, but at the same time, you don't want to just overwhelm them with adjectives, because if you do, they're not going to remember any of it. So, there's popular stuff like the 3x3 rule, where it's like you describe three things and you give each one of them three descriptors. And that's a cool way, when in doubt, to make sure that you're putting enough description in there. I tend to lean more on the side of less is more. That's advice that will come from like Chris Perkins when he talks about descriptions. He talks about giving just the barest bones and encouraging your players to ask questions about what else might be there. So, for example, not necessarily listing out what kind of doors are in the room or what the windows are like or that kind of thing. Instead, having your characters go, okay, do I see any doors? Is there a window in this space? Is there natural lighting? Is it dark? That kind of stuff. And so I think we'll do a little bit of both. We'll start with one that's the 3x3 so we can kind of see how that works. And then we'll do one box text that is a little more bare bones, and encourages a little more conversation, I think. So let's open up with a strong box text to really kind of set the mood here. So let's say, all right. So we've got a description for this room. So this room is the upper story of a crumbling tower. The dome ceiling is mostly intact and features an ancient mural depicting the various planes of existence in relation to the material plane, which resides at the center. The characters aren't likely to realize it yet, but this mural is the solution to the puzzle in Area 3. The walls are also feature murals, though they are in worse condition. Images of celestial bodies and cosmic designs are obscured by peeling paint and cloying mold. So we've got enough here for us to work with. So let's say you emerge into the upper story of a crumbling tower. Pale light. And you're writing all this for atmosphere, so sometimes you'll put stuff in here that may not be relevant to the moment, and just bear in mind that you might skip it when you read it. You might end up paraphrasing this as opposed to reading the whole thing out for your characters. For example, if they're there at night, there may not be pale light that comes in through cracks in the ceiling. Floods in through cracks in the tall domed ceiling, and that's an example of our 3x3, our first three here, right? We described the ceiling, and we described it as tall, domed, and it's a ceiling. So there's our three things about it, right? We don't need to do three adjectives about the ceiling, just three things that denote a specific point of reference. In fact, that's four things, because we actually talk about, there's cracks in it. So plenty of description there. So pale light floods in through cracks in the tall dome ceiling. The walls are circular with peeling murals spanning floor to ceiling. They're doing more than spanning floor to ceiling. We want to suggest that they're on the ceiling as well. So we will, because we want our character to ask about that. The walls are circular with peeling murals that cover every inch of the mold crusted stone. And mold crusted counts as one thing. So we've described the walls here. They're peeling, they've got peeling murals that cover every inch, and they've got mold crusted stone. That's our second rule of 3 here. It's walls, murals, mold crusted stone, right? So gives us enough description here. Come on, there we go. All right. Our circular width, it wants a comma there. Wonderful. Okay. Okay, so we need one more descriptor here. We don't want to talk about the mural on the ceiling yet because that is a secret in this room, and we don't want to necessarily give that away. We've already drawn attention to the ceiling. We've drawn attention to the murals, so we've hinted at this kind of thing. But we don't want to just spell it out, or else there's no puzzle to solve later on. So we want to have some other feature in here. Now, that feature might be the mephits. We said that we've got 2 ice mephits and 4 storm mephits that inhabit the space. They're bored and brimming with mischief, which they immediately direct at the characters upon arrival. If the characters try to defend themselves, the mephits become hostile. So the question here is, are the mephits hiding? If they are, then we don't want to draw attention to them. We want them to pop out on their own. Are they doing something else? Are they maybe quarreling over a game or a bit of something they would consider interesting loot? Maybe they're having cockroach races in here or something along those lines. That they immediately abandon and then turn their attentions on the characters. I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of the mephits doing something to waylay their boredom that they immediately abandon and then focus all their attentions on the characters. And so that might be our third descriptor here. So we might say something along the lines of a group of strange imp-like creatures with bodies seemingly made of either ice or stormy winds, argue incessantly over in a circle around a cluster of racing cockroaches. A group of strange imp-like creatures with bodies seemingly made of either ice or stormy winds argue incessantly in a circle around a cluster of racing cockroaches. Okay, so it gives us enough of a description there. There's our third thing. We've got our creatures. They're imp-like. They're made of ice or stormy gusts, and they're in a circle, and they're arguing. And that, again, gives us enough detail here. We don't necessarily need to describe, the doors and the size of the room, although if we're doing theater of the mind, it's good to have that information kind of at your fingertips so when your characters ask, you can pass that along. But it's not something that you necessarily need to open up with, right? because we want them to remember the impression of the room as they go in, and then we can get into details. One of the best, I think, writing advice that I've ever been given on stuff like this is actually about writing fiction, but I think it applies just as well, and that's um, that people, when they experience something new, they take in the impression of it first and then they get into the details, right? So, opening with the impression that characters get, the impression that they make, that the room makes on them or an NPC makes on them, and then letting them ask about the finer details later is frequently a really good technique to keep from one, overloading people, and two, setting the atmosphere that you're really trying to establish. Cool. So we are about halfway through our time, which means that I'm going to do a shameless self plug, and then we're going to get into our next little block of text here. And that is that I am not just a guy who writes adventures on YouTube, I am also a professional DM. I run games on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr, run games almost every day of the week, and I just added a whole bunch of new ones. So if you are a DM or a GM who's looking to have a little bit of time as a player, which I strongly encourage, it's one of the best ways to grow as a GM, is to sort of get the experience that your players get, so you can keep that in mind as you're building out your own adventures. Or if you just or if you're a player looking to learn the game or looking for a consistent group that's not going to flake out on you, and is going to keep a weekly schedule, then come on and join me at, again, startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. Like I said, I've just added a whole bunch of adventures. Currently, all, for the most part, modules, things like Tomb of Annihilation, Lost Mine of Phandelver, Ghost of Saltmarsh. But I also have the occasional one shots that are adventures that I've written myself. And so, if you ever want to see kind of the proof in the pudding, seeing if the techniques that I use to write adventures on this channel are actually any good at all, come join one of my one shots and see for yourself. Anyway, again, that is startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I hope you'll come and check it out. And if you're not seeing any games on there that interest you or they're not on your schedule, bear in mind that I do custom bookings. So thank you for listening to my little quick plug. And now we'll go ahead and get back to our regularly scheduled program. Cool. So let's continue talking about box text. All right, so we have our 3x3, and that's a good way to kind of get started. But you'll notice that, like, when we read through this, it's a lot of information, right? You emerge into the upper story of a crumbling tower. Pale light floods in through the cracks in the tall dome ceiling. The walls are circular with peeling murals that cover every inch of the mold-crusted stone. A group of strange imp-like creatures with bodies seemingly made of either ice or stormy winds argue incessantly in a circle around a cluster of racing cockroaches. Cool. A lot of information that we just kind of went, and here it is, and we dumped on you. So let's take another approach. Let's do something that's a little, a little, a little more bare bones, a little more basic, but still can kind of fit the need. Let's go to our setback here, where we have a broad balcony that stretches into a weather-beaten bridge that extends to a similar balcony on another tower, without railings, that have since been lost to the elements and storm clouds that gather up above. And so we can do another call out here. If we're using Notion, it makes it nice and easy. And we can simply say, you step out onto a broad balcony that stretches into a into a rain-slicked bridge that extends into a rain-slick bridge. It spans the gap between two towers, connecting to another identical rail-less actually, we can leave the rail-less bit out. Another identical balcony. Cool. So we just say you step out onto a broad balcony that stretches into a rain-slicked bridge. It spans the gap between two towers um, connecting to another identical balcony. Um, very simple. Don't need a whole lot more here. Is there a lot of other stuff going on? Absolutely, there is. We have our gargoyle that is probably hidden. We have these skeletons on the other side of the bridge that may or may not be in view. We haven't mentioned that there's no railings here. That's something to ask. We haven't talked about the stormy sky. We've just said that it's a rain-slicked bridge, which suggests that it's raining. Um, and so we've just put a little bit of information out here, and we're leaving the rest, one, to the imagination of our players, and two, open to them asking. And there's a couple advantages to doing it this way. One is that uh, their brains are going to fill in the gaps for you. They're going to imagine their own things. This is going to imagine their own environment, and they're going to bring that imagination to bear. Two is an extension of that, is that they might come up with creative things that might exist here that you haven't thought of that they're going to interact with. So, you know, they may uh, ask specifically, you know, whether there's gargoyles overlooking this or whether there's other bridges that crisscross underneath or above or things like that that we haven't really thought about. We haven't really defined in this. Um, the gargoyles we have, but not the crisscrossing bridges. They might, you know, ask about the architecture. They might, you know, ask if it's possible to crawl along the side of the bridge because of you know the crenellations or something along those lines. And so they can kind of add their own thoughts to this. And you now have the flexibility to adopt some of that kind of in the moment. So if you're playing with characters that are being especially creative, this is a good way, one, to inspire that creativity, and two, to kind of let it feed your own scenes. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of collectively world build without your players even really knowing that they are collaborating in that world building process. So makes it really easy for you to write those kinds of things, and there is a good, you know, there's some good reasons to do it. Now, I will tell you that, you know, frankly, I am of the mind that you want to do a balance of both of these. Some rooms need the 3x3 description. They need that extra kind of context and detail. Other places don't need so much. And frankly, if you kind of vary up your descriptions in their length, they'll feel more unique when you're reading them off. If every room you've got three things for, your players are going to subconsciously pick up on that, and it's going to feel like every room is kind of won't feel like the same necessarily because they'll have different descriptors, but it'll just always feel like they're getting the same lump of information every time. But sometimes you give them more, sometimes you give them less. It feels more varied, and I don't want to say there's a more musical quality to it, but it becomes less plotting for your players in some ways. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, well-described process about the emergent collaboration, allowing players to help dictate the details is great. Thank you. And yes, emergent is the word I was looking for, part with you that I couldn't find. So thank you. I appreciate that. Again, it's just another tool for you to put in your GM toolbox, right? So you can bust it out as you need to. Okay. Well, let's do. I kind of feel like we should do the rest of the box text now because I'm a completionist to some degree. Um, So maybe we go ahead and we do that for our puzzle and our big bad, and then the reward is already in the same room as the big bad, so there's no need for us to describe that. But let's go ahead and do some quick box text for this. Let's apply what we learned. Okay. Um, so puzzle. Its enormous brass orrery dominates the center of this room. Despite its age, it continues to track the movement of celestial bodies as they turn about a central crystalline sphere. The walls were once covered in star charts and diagrams, but these have long since succumbed to mold and wet. Now the walls feature only their tattered remains over darkly painted stone. This is one where our description is kind of plenty for our box text here. Um, or at least it's a good start. But of course, there is something else in this room that we need to note. We need to note the brass door that is the puzzle door in this space here. So, um, this is one where we kind of give the description of the room, and then there's something significant that we want to make sure that we draw the character's attention to because it's important that they see in this room and it's obvious. And so I'm just going to shift return on here so I can get a little space and start a new paragraph. Um, I really only use multiple paragraphs in a scene description if there's something that's just really important that we need to add in here. And so let's see here. For our puzzle, we say on the wall of this room is a brass door that features a series of interlocking rings. Each ring bears a different planar object, and the rings can be turned to solve the puzzle. Okay, so we just want to describe it, and we want to let our characters, rather our players, ask questions on behalf of their characters to get more details. So this is a case of where we're kind of doing both of the things. We're doing a 3x3, and then we're also adding in just kind of a nice, clean, emergent description, I guess we'll call it. So, say a large brass door is set into one side of the room. It bears three concentric rings around a central circle. Each is labeled with enameled enameled script. Cool. So again, we don't need bears 3. That should be not on the side, one side of the room. So a large brass door is set into one side of the room. It bears 3 concentric rings around a central circle. Each is labeled with enameled script. And so again, a very minimalist description of this puzzle door, because again, we want to draw attention to it, but we don't want to give over a whole bunch of details. We don't want to talk about, the script outlines various planes of existence, and they're all jumbled around, and we want the characters to ask those questions. And do the rings turn? Do they? What does the script say? And if they're not asking an important question as they're investigating it, we can always feed that to them. Somebody might say, "Oh, I want to know what the script says." I go over and I read it. And we can say, "Great," and we can read off what the scripts say. That the central circle says material. Then the next ring around it says Feywild and Shadowfell. The next one says air, water, earth, fire. The last one says Elysium, Limbo, Hades, and Mechanus. And you notice that the rings appear as though they might rotate, they might turn in the door. And so, again, we're we're letting them investigate the puzzle, and then we're giving them information as they go. We might feed a little bit of that to them, but it's going to make them feel more involved in the puzzle, and it's going to make them feel less like we just handed them solutions for that. So this is a great example of doing kind of combining both of these techniques. All right. So our last box text is our BBEG. All right, so we have a circular room, has a tall dome ceiling. Yeah, we've gotten that before. With the gaping hole set into one side. So we've got a comment in the chat here. Jonathan Frost says, do we need skill DCs here for players to know about the planes? We can if we want. That's usually something that I would come up with. Going back to the orrery room, the puzzle room. That's usually something I would kind of come up with on the fly based off of the characters. Because some characters probably, some characters are going to know right out of the gate that these are planes of existence. Just with their character background, they might automatically know that. You might decide that that's general knowledge living in the material plane, that any adventurer would have heard of different planes of existence. They certainly would have heard of the Feywild, at least, right? Maybe they would. Maybe in your world they have, maybe they haven't. They're certainly on a different plane of existence right now, since they're in a domain of dread. But, if for whatever reason, if they've just been kind of rocking through this and they really haven't had any challenges, and they get here and the players legitimately don't know that these are other planes of existence, I might have them roll for the check. One thing that's hard to do, especially if you're playing with a bunch of like experienced players who know that these are all planes of existence, it seems kind of forced to go, well, your characters don't know. You're within your rights to do it, but sometimes it can feel like you're just throwing extra barriers up against them when you do that. Because they know and they can already kind of guess at the solution to this sort of thing. Yes, metagaming is a bad thing, but they can't forget. It's hard to not know what you know. Now, if you are playing with a group of very new players who don't know that these are different planes of existence and haven't heard of these things before, and are kind of struggling with this, then yeah, maybe we toss in a check. Maybe we throw one in there that makes it feel like they've won this information when they succeed. Just bear in mind that they can fail the dice roll, and then they might not get that. So be prepared to have other ways for them to figure it out. Maybe they recall, a similar mural in a different room or something along those lines, if you need to. So the answer, short answer to my long answer there is, we can include them if we want. We don't necessarily need to. All right. Back to the BBEG. So circular room. Kind of want to change that now because, although the towers, they're all kind of circular thematically. All right, so circular room, tall dome ceiling with a gaping hole set in one side. At the center of the dome is the wreckage of a colossal brass telescope that now slumps like a once mighty, now decaying derelict. This lenses lie scattered and shattered on the floor, leaving behind huge chunks of light-bending glass. The remnants of ancient beakers, retorts, and other vessels collected dust on the table and benches that line the room. So we've got a little bit here to add in. This is one that I would rewrite a little bit here, frankly, because I'm not a huge fan of how that was described. It's a useful description, but I think we can do better for our players. And there's some more detail we want to put in here. So we can say something to the effect of, the room before you is another large circular space with a domed ceiling similar to others you've seen before. However, this one features a large trap door set at an angle into the ceiling. At the center of the room, at the center of the floor, I should say in the center of the floor, in the center of the floor is the wreckage of a colossal brass telescope. It slumps like a mighty derelict with lenses scattered in chunks about the room. Each casts prismatic rainbows on the ceiling and walls as light bends through them. Okay, so we've got a basic description of the room. We probably want to queue up the bit about the treasure hunter and our storm sentinel here as well. So we'll add a little more description. But one thing that we can do here is that we did here that you can do is if you have rooms that are similar in some way, it's okay to call that out. In fact, calling it out shows the players that you're aware of the similarity and that it's intentional. It wasn't just like an oops, I forgot I didn't come up with other ideas. And so now I'm, did the same thing twice and I didn't mean to. So when we say the room before you is another large circular space with a domed ceiling similar to the others that you've seen before, although I have before in there twice, I want to get rid of that. I don't like repeating myself, especially within a single sentence. Then you're calling that out. You're saying, hey, this is a room like many of the others you've seen. Now, here's what's different about it. And we do that with the telescope. This should say at the far end of the room stands I think an Azure Sentinel is I think they're a medium-sized creature. Let's find out. Let's double check. Let's grab the monster manual. Just got the 2024 monster manual here. Let's take a quick look. And Azures. Yes, medium elemental. Okay, so we don't want to say it's towering or anything like those things. It's a medium-sized elemental. And what about Magman? Are they small or are they medium-sized? What are they? Let's see. Magman are small. Okay, cool. So we could say stands a humanoid creature made seemingly out of, or I should say manifested, vested from pure storm. 3 smaller creatures like goblin-esque storm clouds stand behind it. Before it is a man with a wild white beard and weather-stained cap. Weather-stained. The tension between them crackles like lightning in the air. Cool. All right, so another example of using our two techniques here. But this last line is what I kind of want to point out to you. The tension between them crackles like lightning in the air. So again, we've given the impression of what's going on here. We don't need to outline the conversation. We don't want to say what they're talking about necessarily, because we can come up with that if we need to, if it's important. We want to give the impression that whatever the characters have walked into, this is a taut moment, and it's likely to go to violence. And the characters can use that information and do with it what they will. And so we can have ask more questions. They might charge in to fight. They might decide that this is, the person they're looking for and rush in and try to kidnap them. They could do all kinds of different stuff here. But we're just giving them the impression of that they get of the situation, and they can look for the specifics or not as they see fit. Let's see here. Goblin-esque storm clouds. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's good enough. All right. Terrific. So that brings us just about to the end of our time here. And I hope that this was helpful, talking about block text and just coming up with a little bit of bare bones for our NPC. For my own brainstorming purposes, because I don't work on this when I'm not on the channel here, so I want you to be able to see everything that I'm doing, but I can't help think about it sometimes when I'm not here. What should we work on next? What does the chat think? We've got a bunch of different scenes here that we need to build out. We need to build out the one where the characters seek out an elderly storyteller for clues about the whereabouts of this artifact. We've got one where they go seeking a siren to learn the rest of a sea shanty that has clues hidden in it. And we've got a part where they've got to make a raid into a ghost ship castle that is our castle-like structure made of old ghost ships that has become a stronghold for Sahuagin. We've got one where they go to a wizard's tower, where the wizard's tower is an enormous pillar of salt growing out of Shallow Lagoon, and they're got to try to get information out of this wizard. Meanwhile, the wizard has alerted the Aboleth-led faction as to their presence. And then we've also got the Moving Isle, where there's a shrine to Evander set upon the back of an enormous dragon turtle, and the shrine holds valuable information to the artifact, which we can guess, but this is a dungeon sort of environment, but that the dragon turtle is slowly descending back into the depths, causing the dungeon to slowly flood, and putting a time factor on exploration, increasing the tension on the PCs. So for my own brainstorming purposes, what do you all think we should work on next? What should we jump into on Wednesday? If you have any thoughts, toss them in the chat. Give everybody a little bit of time to do that. And while you do, I just want to say thank you so much for uh, being here. I really appreciate all of your time and the input you guys put into the chat. This is all very exciting for me, and it's a lot of fun to have this um, sort of organic creativity time with you guys that just lets kind of the creative thoughts flow and we get to make something fun and exciting and I get all your input. So thank you so much for all that. If you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow, helps me stay motivated um, to do this. So I really, really appreciate any of that engagement you guys toss in there. It looks like we've got some votes in the chat. So let's see here. Jonathan Frost says we could define what clue this encounter provides to lead to the next, or there could be multiple clues, in which case I am not sure what would be the next step. Should it be linear or not? I guess. Yeah. So we have some of the clues defined for the treasure hunter here. We've we might want to refine these here because they are going to have shifted a little bit here. We talked about checks to find out the treasure hunter knows the old salt, who is the old storyteller, and might point back there. We talked about um, that the treasure hunter can recount the sea shanty or a bit of it, and get our characters to go looking to investigate that, learning the rest of it. And then there was also that lead about the treasure hunter could be intimidating to sharing their next lead, which is an old shipped log believed to be reside within the ghost ship castle. And so we don't necessarily need more clues than that outlined. I will be honest with you. When you're running this, players will come up with wild ways of getting from point A to point B. Um, and so these are all just kind of suggestions of things that they might find for us. Things that we have prepared and then we're ready with, but they may come up with some other stuff that we can toss in on our own. Um, so since we've got some of these clues already laid out, I don't, I personally, I wouldn't worry about putting any more into that dungeon. But we can certainly brainstorm a few others if we want to add more to that. In terms of this being linear, this isn't going to be a linear section of the adventure. People are going to, we have no way of knowing which area our characters are going to go to first, where they're going to go next. And so we're just kind of building this out piece by piece and knowing that we may have to adapt some of it as they level up, as they get bigger and stronger. We're just taking kind of our best guess of where they're going to go. So, unless there's any other votes on what we outline or what we start working on Wednesday, then I guess I'll have a think about it. And wherever I feel the most inspired is what we will go with, which is generally what I encourage people to do. Start with what you know, whatever ideas you have. But if you guys got some ideas right now, we can give it a few more minutes. Feel free to jump in and cast a vote. Should we talk about the sea shanty and the siren? Should we talk about the ghost ship castle, the wizard's tower, the moving isle, or should we write a social encounter with our storyteller? What do we think? I'm gonna enjoy my coffee for a second while I let this delay catch up for everybody. All right, we've got one vote for the shipwreck castle. Okay, cool. Then, yeah, let's work on that next time. That'll be fun to lend, kind of to design a raid style or heist style adventure, one that isn't meant to be a dungeon crawl, nor is it a purely social encounter. But we can talk a little bit about kind of how we go about approaching those. Those are a lot of fun to write and run as well. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks again. And if you want to jump into one of my games, again, come find me at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I hope to meet all of you at one of my gaming tables. But until then, I will see you all on Wednesday. Talk to you then. Bye.